You're with Clement Manyathela
on 702.
Let's walk the talk. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
DSTV channel 856,
92.7 and 106 FM.
8 minutes after 9 o'clock. Dumelang. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Clement Manyathela Show on this 24th day of November. Great to be in your company. Thanks for joining us here on 702. I hope you had a wonderful weekend in the midst of that important gathering South Africa was hosting. What a successful G20 gathering. I've been saying the whole weekend as we were broadcasting live from the summit in Nasrec that our government has outdone itself. The event was well organized, it was well run, it was well strategized, even politically. We really put up a world-class show. President Cyril Ramaphosa also rose to the occasion. I think he met the moment. In the lead up to this gathering, the president was diplomatic when that was required. He was firm when the moment required that. What do you think? It was a historic summit for different reasons. This is the first summit ever that an African country hosts the G20 summit. This is the first time ever. South Africa was on the global stage. All eyes were on us. And it's not always that you have a country like ours host such important discussions that will guide and shape the global agenda. It's not always that we host a gathering of the world's most powerful and industrialized economies, the world's most influential leaders, and South Africa is right at the center. But more importantly, though, for me, South Africa was able to secure the adoption of the declaration on the first day of the summit, which was quite strategic. The other success is how this summit has firmly placed the interests of the continent at the heart of conversations. I mean, when you look at the declarations, there are so many African issues that have found expression in the declarations that were adopted. There was, in fact, such a cool video you should see that the presidency posted right after the summit. You can see world leaders going to shake President Cyril Ramaphosa's hand. They're congratulating him. It was so cool. Like they were telling him how proud they are of him, thanking him for his leadership, thanking him for his hospitality. So make no mistake, this marked a significant milestone for South Africa's leadership on the international stage. And I think multilateralism has won the day. As Lula da Silva said, it was a diplomatic victory. What do you think? Let me know how you think South Africa did. Let me know how you think the president fared. You can give us a call on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Are you proud of President Cyril Ramaphosa? Yesterday we were getting voice notes from people who were saying that. And I joked that it's not always that you get voice notes of people often call in or send out voice notes and say, we are so proud of the president. So how do you think he's fared? How do you think South Africa has handled things this weekend? Or maybe you've got some inputs about stuff that piqued your interest over the weekend, maybe from the declarations or from things that transpired at the summit. 011-883-0702 is the number to dial. WhatsApp's on 072-702-1702.
Clement Manyathela, streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
DSTV channel 856,
92.7
and 106 FM.
Good morning, Clement. Great to hear from you, and great work done at the summit, of course, also with the interviews that you took on. Indeed, I also stand very proud of the president and what the country has been able to achieve in hosting the G20 summit. I think one of the things that you've mentioned as well is to see multilateralism agreement, right, amongst the G20 members. That for us also gave us comfort, because I think with all this bilateral engagements that we have seen post the tariff wars, I think there was a bit of a shake-up, and people were wondering, will the globe be able to work together again without being too protectionist? So I think for this, it was definitely one that was commendable. Great success by South Africa. Definitely celebrated.
Hi, good morning, Clement and the team. Sam here from Joburg. Yeah, I would like to congratulate our president for what he did during the G20 summit. I'm so proud of him. My little worry is us, citizens of South Africa. What is going to happen here after the G20? Are we going back to normal? Our lives are they going back to normal as it is? How are we going to survive the struggle of the poverty and unemployment? Thanks, Sam from Joburg.
Yeah, Sam, that's like saying, if Begunom Kayimbi, there was a ceremony at home and you cooked or you slaughtered a cow and the elders of the family had come and there were important discussions or celebrations, and then they leave and we ask, okay, what does this mean? I mean, we can't have the ceremony every day. We can't have definitely that spirit the whole time. That's something that happens once in a while. Now, the conversation I'm going to have with Zain Dango actually touches on what's next. And I imagine maybe you mean in as far as implementations go for the declarations that have been made, because just because we hosted the G20 summit doesn't mean our problems have disappeared. No, we still have a problem with poverty, as you indicate. The highest levels of unemployment, inequality is an issue. I can go on and on. Global challenges are also there. So those don't cease to exist just because there were world leaders that gathered and had a conversation. But, John Pellman said something so important yesterday as we were broadcasting live from Nazareth. He said, there are certain things that we enjoy today, certain privileges, certain rights, that actually started as a proposal during these big, even multilateral discussions, or through these multilateral discussions. Take the issue of gay marriages, for instance. It was a big taboo at some point. But at some point, there were certain countries that would mention it every time there are world leaders who meet, or every time there are important events. Doesn't have to be G20 or the United Nations. And it's just slowly introducing and raising things that at some point, ultimately, they get adopted. Some people who may have dismissed it in the past actually gets to pause and say, actually, let's listen to this, or let's hear what the reasoning is behind this kind of proposal. The point that John Pellman was making yesterday was, yes, you may look at some of the declarations and think, but what does it mean for me now? I mean, when you look at the issue of critical minerals, for instance, that is in the declarations, you are tempted to just yawn because it talks about beneficiation, added value. We can't just be exporters of critical minerals. We've got to add value and be part of the value chain that adds value to those minerals. And we've just not had that opportunity. And perhaps it's our fault, right? The fact that it's in the declarations now doesn't mean there's going to be beneficiation in the next 2 years or in the next year. In fact, you know how long we've been talking about beneficiation as South Africa, but also at a continental level through the African Union. So it's an issue that you still must continuously raise. The fact that it's not been implemented in the past doesn't mean you give up. But governments are able to also use these declarations as a reference point whenever they are formulating policies and the program of action for the next year or the next couple of years. It's 19 minutes now after 9 o'clock. Let's continue with your WhatsApps on 072-702-1702. How do you think South Africa has fared? I know there are some disagreements even around how I was listening to a guest on Bongane's show this morning who suggested that we shouldn't have said no to the Americans when they wanted to send the chargé d'affaires. We shouldn't have characterized even their delegation as quote unquote junior, because remember, our government was very clear that you will receive the equivalent, right? That was very important. If you're sending a chargé d'affaires, someone on that equivalence from DERCO will also be sent then to hand over the gavel. But you can't want to breach protocol at the G20. Normally, this is how this is done. And if you can't do that, you don't have to participate. And this guest on Bongani's show argued that why that is unnecessary, because we still need to sit down with the US, especially now, because remember, even our tariffs, negotiations around tariffs, that's still continuing. You don't want a tit for tat. You don't know how the US is going to respond. But my argument is, for how long then do you subject yourself to that treatment? Because nobody is arguing here that go and disrespect the US. No. But you need to be able to, at the very least, appreciate that you are a sovereign country that must take its sovereign decisions. And you can't be forced into doing things that ordinarily are not done. So were we supposed to just show the other cheek? What do you think of how South Africa also handled that particular issue? Because the argument was, are you going to participate or are you not? And if you're not going to participate, it's very tricky for us to welcome you into the plenary for a ceremonial act where you just want to recognize the handover of power. Let's make it easy for you. You don't have to come here for that ceremonial act. Actually, you can come to DERCO to pick up the gavel. Was that a rude thing to do towards the US? I don't necessarily think so. What do you think? More of your WhatsApps.
Clement, it was well organized and planned, window dressed, all good, beautiful speeches, beautiful state posture. The only practical reality is how to unlock local and foreign investment, unleashing capital into this economy without being penalized. So how do you free that up, and how do you actually get people to invest in South Africa without being penalized because of BE, etc. So yeah, beautiful, very nice, but we have to be practical as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Clement. Indeed, the summit was a resounding success. Our country rose to the occasion. CR was, wow, he displayed that indeed he's a statesman. He did well. And it was so lovely to see social media posts of ordinary South Africans being patriotic. And congratulations to those who worked behind the scenes to make this momentous occasion successful. I'm really proud to be a South African. I'm proud of my government, our country. And yes, we have problems like every other country out there, but I think we scored a big win with this one. This is Dikeso in Northwold.
I'm really proud about how our honorable president handled the proceedings, and the fact that they took advantage of the US not being there and push an agenda that favors the entire world, as opposed to the propaganda that Trump has been pushing all along. I think it was a good platform for the world to engage on things that are very, very, very critical and important without the bully in the room. So yeah, I'm really proud about how the proceedings were handled.
Good morning, Clement. As a South African, I'm very proud that our country hosted a very successful G20 summit for the first time on the African soil. We showed the whole world that Africans are capable. And it is a lesson to people like President Trump that Africans can succeed without them. And to you as journalists, thank you very much for world-class journalism. We are also proud of you. Thank you very much. Peter Maila Machaba from Letswata.
Hey, Clement. I think our country did really, really well hosting the G20, despite our city's infrastructure challenges and notwithstanding some protests and so on. I think which just showed democracy at work, actually. But I think that our president did extremely well. I was incredibly proud of him, and I thought he acted very statesmanlike, specifically with regards to how he managed the Donald Trump snubs, because, you know, they really were just snubs. That man is beyond imperious. So I think our president did brilliantly, and well done to all involved.
Yeah, look, we've got to give credit where it's due, but it looks like we know how to rise to the occasion as South Africa. Like, I think our government has the capacity to rise to the occasion when it comes to these world events. And we must take some lessons from that, because we've hosted similar remember the World Cup in 2010? That was like world class. There was the Rugby World Cup 1995. What else? There are a number of events. The Cricket World Cup in the early 2000s. So there's a lot that we have done where we've risen to the occasion. We must just take some lessons from that and use that for how we respond to things domestically and how we do things domestically. Tsepo, you're calling us from Pretoria. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Clement. How are you?
It's Ada.
Clement, look, I don't understand why we seem to be doing so well at the international stage. But, when it comes to internal affairs, we seem to do so badly. I mean, look at the praise that the president has been receiving throughout the weekend on social media platform. Now, the international community, they are back in their respective country. Can't we continue in that very same spirit to make Johannesburg to be the city that want to be? I was listening to one of your colleagues in the morning, President praising, the mayor of Johannesburg, claiming that Johannesburg is at its best.
What happened to Tsepo there? Oh, Tsepo got cut off. Let's see if we can have him back on the line. Tsepo was calling us there from Pretoria. I think his line got cut off. Let's go to some WhatsApps in the meantime.
Good morning, Clement. Yes, a very proud moment for the country. So now we just need to push forward, be consistent, especially from the president and the government. Let this not only be for the G20 summit, but also pushing forward in service delivery, high impact service delivery for the country as well. Not only because we had a G20 summit, which was very successful, highly successful, very proud moment indeed. But now we just need some consistency from the president and the government in pushing forward with delivering such services, not only to other nations, but also to the country as a whole. Thank you.
Good morning, Clement and team. Luanda here. South Africa really did a great job in hosting the G20. I really appreciated the president's leadership, the way he handled things, the way he handled America. Sometimes you just need to take a stand, and I was happy that he did so. And it was a strong one. And so congratulations, Cupcake. You did a phenomenal job. And we are extremely proud. We are proud to be South Africans today.
Morena Khoshi Madimej Ralocha Papa. Look, we are proud. We are proud of the stance and the position of our leadership in South Africa. Yes, it doesn't mean we are going to vote ANC, but the reality is this man did well. He became a voice for the entire Africa. He became a leadership that we have been desiring to see. And we are proud, regardless of how many disagreements we have. This week, our president did well. And we as South Africans can boldly stand and say this is the kind of voice we've been hoping and praying to see in the position of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. It's going up to 9:30. Let's get the latest in Eyewitness News headlines. We're going to come back with more of your calls on 011-883-0702. You can send us a WhatsApp as well on 072-702-1702. What's your assessment of the G20 summit? I mean, we hosted the BRICS summit not so long ago. Now it's the G20 summit. I mean, we are part of, there's no way you can take for granted our country. I think this has really firmly placed us in global conversations, and that is quite an important thing. When you have platforms like this, you're able to advance the interests not only of your country, but you advance the interests of the continent. Ordinarily, I mean, when you look at the declarations, you see how many times Africa has been mentioned, probably over 80 times. That's never happened before. It's never happened before that at a G20 summit, you've got issues that are quite important and central to this continent of Africa. And continental issues, they feature so prominently in the declarations, in the leaders' declarations from the G20 summit. That is a big deal.
Your voice,
Your station.
your open line
Walk the talk with Clement Manyathela.
on 702.
25 minutes before 10 o'clock. This is the 702 open line. We've been reflecting so far how the G20 summit was run, and also the outcomes of the G20 summit, because that's pretty important. If you have managed to look through the declarations or you've heard on the radio, what are you most happy about that the matter has gotten the attention of these world powerful, influential leaders? There are so many issues, of course, on the G20 leaders declaration, issues that place this continent. I mean, there are issues that are of this continent that were placed at the heart of the declarations, issues that ordinarily wouldn't really find that level of global attention. Are there declarations that you thought were important? Are there things that piqued your interest during this weekend? Someone just sent me a message, in fact, and I'm going to ask you about this thing that they've asked me about. Have you noticed that the Indian Prime Minister, whenever he comes, particularly in this country, you often have people who come out to his hotel, or they'll come to wherever he's going to be addressing, like at the BRICS summit. If you'll remember the last time, there was an Indian community, that came with placards celebrating the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. Which other leaders do you see that happen with? And this person who sent me this message said, I'm wondering if it's a rented crowd or there's genuine love for their leader, because it is fascinating. Do you know, if this is something that gets organized, or these are just, people who appreciate the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi? Please let me know on 011-883-0702. I thought this was an interesting observation. I just don't have the answer. I've never really had conversations with the people who often come out to hold placards to greet the Prime Minister wherever he stays, at the hotel or at these gatherings that he attends. What do you think of that? And is it something that you have also equally noticed? 011-883-0702. Your WhatsApp's on 072-702-1702. Chris, you're calling us from Springs. What are your thoughts? Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and thank you for the opportunity, my brother. Let me doff my head off to President Cyril Ramaphosa and his government for a sterling work. In fact, we have proven over time that we are, in fact, a country capable of hosting big international events, from the sports itself to geopolitics and stuff like that. And I must also actually not actually take away from a journalist, yourself, and many other media practitioners, in fact, for making sure that you actually bring this news to us, to our television screens and radio as well alike. Although, Clement, just want maybe to echo Julius Malema's sentiments on calling upon African leaders who were mum when the president was thrown under the bus or was under attack from the U.S. president, as to why are they quiet, not actually throwing their way in support of the President Ramaphosa, taking into account that we have the AU, which is coming up in January, and they'll be talking unity in Africa and so forth. So is there any unity if one of our own has been actually left to fend for himself? But yeah, above all, a big up to the president and government. And thank you for the opportunity once again.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And you ask a very important question, because do we even speak yet as do we have a united voice as the African Union? And that's what they've been trying to build for the longest of time. Here's the tricky part about dealing with the US, in my view. You can't necessarily want to join the fight that doesn't involve you, because you'll catch strays. If Donald Trump, the president of the US, is somehow having disagreements or there are tensions with the leader of Nigeria, for instance, if our president comes out and enters that debate and that quote-unquote fight, because this is the US you're dealing with, you do have to think about the consequences of that intervention, of your involvement. And look, I agree with you. I think we need to speak as a collective voice, especially as the African Union. I mean, the youngest population is on this continent. We often talk about how we need to seek markets. Well, there's a market here on the continent, over 1 billion people. And for some reason, we still aren't able to speak collectively as one. And that is a bit concerning. But I think people are scared. People are scared to intervene, because at the end of the day, when you sit down with the US, it's you and them. And they may take you back to some of the things that you have said or some of your allegiances. Remember, Trump didn't even want us to be part of BRICS. He threatened that any country, whatever happened to that threat, by the way? Because Donald Trump said, any country that aligns with BRICS is going to get an additional tariff. Remember? What happened to that? Was it just what? Was it just a threat for vibes? My goodness. Well, there are countries that still, in fact, at the time, there were meetings in Brazil, I remember, when he made these comments. And there are countries that still are aligned to BRICS. In fact, there are countries that still want to be aligned to BRICS. So I guess that was just, he wanted to threaten people against their allegiance to BRICS. The other thing, even with like something like the G20, where collective decisions are taken, that's why there was concern. In fact, Zane Dango, you'll hear, one of the things they were concerned about is the longer this declaration is open and is still undergoing the changes, the more you open the door for possibility of influence on other countries to sort of object to the declaration. So it was strategic to actually adopt it quite earlier when there was still consensus in the room, because otherwise the US may get to the other countries, if that was their plan, to try and get them to object to the declaration, because you can't argue that there's consensus when there have been other people who raised their hands and objected to that declaration. So that's something else. But whatever action you do, even at G20, at some point you have to sit down with the US administration when you negotiate your tariffs. And you find more and more that there are more world leaders that don't want to enter fights that don't involve them, because they don't want to catch and face the consequences. John, you're calling us from Rudeport. What are your thoughts? Good morning.
Morning, Clement.
Sure.
Wow, what a proud moment. What a proud moment. Very happy to be South African. But I think Cyril should have just maybe actually made it a point that this is not about America. I mean, it's about Trump. It's his personal issues he's got with everybody else. And it should have just been drilled at this summit that, listen, we've worked with America before. We haven't seen those actions before. So this is about Mr. Trump. So he needs to grow up, and that's it. Obviously in a nice way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, John, in Rudeport, I think, he may have tried. Ronald Lamola, Kumbuzo Nchaveni, all of them, whenever they've been asked the question over the weekend about the US, in fact, before even this G20 summit, they've consistently said, we want the US to be part of this. The US is an important part of G20. They were consistent in that. That was the message. Yes, we're in discussions with the US because they may want to change their participation here. Maybe they want to come in a different form. We're engaging with them. Even when accreditation is closed, they were still able and willing to have that conversation. So respect was afforded. In fact, they were asked, they were begged. Our president had to go to America, treated like a little kid, in the Oval Office, being scolded like that. Because part of the plan is not just the negotiations around trade, but it was, we have to hand over the G20 presidency to you. And it's important that you come to South Africa for that. And I think had Trump been here, maybe that would have been an opportunity for him to see for himself that there is no genocide on white South Africans. But what a missed opportunity by America. In fact, some analysts were arguing at Nasrec this weekend that it's a good thing that they didn't come because the whole G20 would have been about America. And now it has not been about America. Yes, on the fringes, that has been the issue that's lurking. But actually, substantial issues were discussed. Dumelo, you're calling us from Centurion. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Madimecha. How are you?
Sure, man. Go ahead.
So, even though he was not here present, Trump, but his destruction could still be felt. And I concur with that sentiment. But my point here is, well done to the president and the country in terms of what we have performed. But the question becomes, what happens when he leaves? Because with the ANC now alleging that they may be recalling him, will the coming president be able to sustain what Cyril One has managed to achieve, to bring back the voice of South African sovereignty in the whole world, the position of our country in geopolitics, and the amount and sheer respect that we have now get as Pretoria? So that is something which is very concerning for me, because he may be recalled anytime soon, but what then happens going forward? So that is the question which I think the ANC or the leadership of the country should be very careful in terms of how they manage this transition, because the work and the stride that Cyril has achieved, it can amount to zero. So, but other than that, well done to the president and the leadership, particularly Lamola. He has really grown in stature. One of the guys which I think maybe they may consider, because he's a diplomacy, they behave like a statesman. But in closing, the point you've mentioned about Africa not speaking in unison when one of their own is under attack, Namibian president, she was outstanding. She came out and defended Cyril. But we saw nobody in even the African Union, even the chairperson of the African Union, they have never issued a statement. But when Trump attacked Nigeria on the fake, I don't know when I say the fake, on the issue that Christian under attack, I saw the AU chairperson issue a statement. So there are a lot of contrasting behavior in terms of Africa to a larger extent, where I believe that maybe they just don't want to be associated with South Africa, or they think like maybe we think we are better, because nobody says anything. And that is quite concerning. But other than that, big up to the president. He did us proud, Mr. Buffalo. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tumelo. Mr. Buffalo, Mr. Cupcake. So many nicknames our president has, hey? It's 13 minutes before 10.
Your voice.
Your station.
Your open line.
Walk the talk with Clement Manyathela.
On 702.
10 minutes before 10 o'clock. Back to your calls and WhatsApps. Dorothy, you calling us? Oh, we've just lost Dorothy there. Dorothy in Lone Hill. Let's bring Dorothy back. Let's go to your WhatsApps on 072 702 and 702.
Good morning, Clemens. I'd like to remain anonymous. I'm very proud of the way the South African president reacted towards Donald Trump, the international bully. And if he's going to try and threaten us with withholding his resources, we are big now. We've grown, so we need to help ourselves. It's time we stood on our own little feet and showed the world that we are not a stupid nation. We can do it for ourselves.
Good day, Clement and the 702 listeners. I'd like to just say now I'm proud of our President Ramaphosa. He did very well and he stand his ground and not to be bullied. And the G20 went very well. Everything was okay. For me, it was wonderful. That's what I can say. Thank you from Justice Chamusi. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Justice. Dorothy, you are in Lone Hill. Good morning.
Hi, Clement.
Hi.
I'm just wanting to say South Africans must stop being negative about their own country. The biggest problem is South Africans. I speak to people on the ground ongoing. Just yesterday, we must get out. It's all bad. You know, if South Africans can change their attitude, foreigners come here and tell me, why are South Africans so negative about their own country? And I don't think we see many problems. Probably if we start paying for our services and also start doing things for ourselves. There are people that's read this book, Carsinomics, that have gone out and do things for themselves. People in Kenya did very much that after colonialism. They didn't wait for the government to knock on their front doors. And I reckon the government has overwhelming problems with the colonial past and corruption. And those are things that they're trying to deal with, but let any of us that are negative go and do that job. And I'll tell you, it's not just this G20. The president works his sides off. He works day and night. He's in this country, in that country. We just travel locally, we're exhausted. But this man pushes. And it's not just a G20, but I don't think he ever slept. His eyes looked so exhausted. And he just kept going. So maybe South Africans must acknowledge what our president does on so many fronts.
Yeah. Dorothy, I saw videos, in fact, of him. He was so heavily involved. Videos of him at almost midnight. He's still like, they're deciding, okay, is this flower pot right? Should we put it here or is it better here? He wanted to go to do, a walkabout at Nasrec late in the evening before the day of the summit. So he was heavily involved. He's worked really hard, and I think we must appreciate that. Thank you for your call, Dorothy. Saul, you're in Highlands North. What are your thoughts? Hi.
Yeah, hi. Firstly, I do commend SA on a brilliant G20. But, the question I do ask myself is what happens to the rest of the years or the years? I mean, take Johannesburg, for instance. There are many areas where street lights and roads, et cetera, need to be fixed and rehabilitated and so on. And I mean, you can shout from the rooftops and you can barely get the people out. Yet when we have an event and there's crisis management going, then suddenly we see everybody. We see traffic cops, we see police on the roads, we see roads being fixed. So tell me, why can't this be extrapolated to the rest of the year or to et cetera? Why do citizens themselves have to, as somebody said, we should do the work ourselves? I don't have a problem with that. But what are we paying services for? Unless we have a crisis in this country when everybody has to get together in a crisis. Otherwise, it's like a laissez-faire attitude.
Yeah, we need to learn from things like that. I think, as I said, I've used the analogy of a family gathering. Sometimes when there's a gathering in your own home, you rally resources, don't you? You make sure that you paint where you have neglected to paint before. You make sure that you clean the house, spring cleaning. It's got to be done because there are visitors that are coming. Equally so, while it is important for us to be ready for such a world event like that, which you have no choice but to really just rise to the occasion, that's very important. And we can't negate the significance of being ready and actually rallying resources for an event like this. But at the same time, I understand why there's frustration. And we've spoken about this before. Frustration among South Africans who feel like, but I've complained about this thing that you're fixing now for so many years. You've never heard me. And some of the things are just the easy, simple things because people are paying for their rates. All they're asking is deliver the services. You've been paid to do that. That's all they're asking. So I get it. I get why people get frustrated when things suddenly start to work. I mean, the police visibility in the Johannesburg area this weekend, That's what people yearn for. People who are tired of crime. Let's wrap up with these WhatsApps.
The president didn't have to do much. He only had to howl and utter one phrase, Wahafa Trump. Now all of a sudden he's now our hero. He's now our messiah again. G20 is over. We are going back to our shacks, unemployed, poor, scared of criminals, and that's how life is. But what happened this week shows that it's easy to rule over South Africans. You just utter one word that you come down to their level, and then from there, they hail you as a hero.
Good morning, Clement, and all 702 listeners. Look, Clement, it was a very great proceedings. We really have to give credit where it's due. But one thing that I've really noticed is that our government has the capacity and the capability to run this country smoothly. If they were able to do so with the G20, look, the number of law enforcement officers who were on the ground. Clement, for the first time in history, of all weekends, I felt very safe. So this really gave us an indication that if they were to decide and say to themselves they want to tackle crime, they want to run this country in a successful manner, they can do so. Not only when there's visitors, but they did very well on the G20.